Greetings and salutations. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share this video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. It was that time of year again, our annual caribou hunt back in 1989. My hunting partner and I had ventured into an area below the Ketnok Ridge alongside the Ketnok River in British Columbia. We were working an area between the river and Mount Marpole in Carnarvon, with Hamilton Ridge to our south. It was a crisp morning, and we were seeing some animals starting to move, with none of them being to our liking. Distance between us and the herd was far too great as well. Having seen some activity, we decided to follow in the direction of the herd in hopes of seeing more substantial animals at some point. We made our way all the way down to where a warden's cabin is located on the southwest side of Hamilton Ridge, and were now at the point where we were sandwiched between Hamilton and Tosher Ridges, respectively. At this point, my partner and I were sitting with our bodies facing in opposite direction. I was combing Hamilton Ridge with my binoculars, and Dave was combing Ketnok with his. We had to have been sitting there for over an hour observing the movements of a number of caribou when Dave says, "I have never seen a timber wolf that big in my entire life. You got to check this out, Bob." On his cue, I turned and began to fix my binoculars on an area in which he was pointing. At this point, the two of us were now sitting with our eyes fixed on what appeared to be a wolf that was the size of a bull elk, a fact which was in and of itself hard to digest mentally. The distance was great, but based on the size of the larger caribou which it was stalking, walking well below them, it was twice the size of the largest male, which didn't make any sense. To me, what I was seeing was an impossibility in the natural world. A timber wolf at that size would have to have been in the neighborhood of 500 pounds, which just cannot be. As I was watching it, I said to Dave, "It's got to be a bear." But even as I said it, I didn't believe my own words. The coloration was not right for a bear, and yet the rump sat too high with the spine to be the profile of a wolf. It was truly a puzzlement to both of us. As we sat watching this, what we thought a wolf, obviously stalk the herd from a lower position on the ridge. It must have been about 20 minutes later, as we both sat watching intently, that this creature lifted off the ground with what we believed to be its front legs, which were now hanging from the body, and began to make its way up the hill towards the herd, appearing just as a hunter would hold its rifle, trying to get closer without being seen. This thing was now walking hunched over like a man. It made its way into position behind a bush, where it once again squatted down, and was evidently watching the activity above it, just as we were. The herd was lumbering along, and had to have consisted of over 50 animals or more, when suddenly, as we watched, this creature made a lightning-fast movement, closing the gap between itself and the herd, repositioning itself behind another grouping of bushes just below him. A couple of caribou seemed to momentarily be startled as it began to trot, but then all things settled down again. Moments later, this creature launched itself into an uphill diagonal run, aiming toward the middle of the herd. The caribou began to run, but the creature began much faster to our eyes, closing the gap, and launched its body, swatting a female to the ground with what appeared to be one blow from its now extended arm, very much like a grizzly bear would whack down an animal from the back in chase. It was now on top of the caribou, thrashing at its body in a violent manner, with both of what appeared to be its arms. This creature, while straddling the caribou's body, had thrown so many blows in such a brief amount of time, it was inconceivable. Our eyes and brains could not believe how many had actually been thrown. This was followed by a long pause where it just sat atop of the victim, apparently resting and eyeing its prize. 15 minutes later or so, this wolf-man-like creature stood to its feet and hoisted the caribou, placing it over its shoulders like a woman wearing a mink stole, and began walking back down the slope, angled to our north. It was then that I told David, "I have to see its face," and leveled my sight on the hill in front of it. I pulled the trigger, firing a single shot, the sound of which bounced back and forth between the two ridges, and it was loud. As soon as the blast occurred, this creature stopped in its tracks and looked directly at us. Immediately, Dave said to me, "Look at that sucker's head. He has a snout and pointed ears. It's damn near half-human wolf." He was right. Its body was long and lanky and covered in what looked like gray fur. And, from our perspective, it had a long but tapered snout like a gray wolf, with what seemed to be a variation of colors in its face. Its ears protruded upward from its head, like two small triangles that were no doubt about it. They stood there, apparently unafraid of who we were and what we could potentially do, for almost 2 minutes. The creature then began to trot away with what was just very long strides across the face of the ridge at a speed which simply a man could not achieve. And all of this while shouldering what must have been 200 to 300 pounds of animal on its back. In what was a matter of only a few minutes, this creature had covered about a half a mile and disappeared into the timber at the base of our north. Dave and I sat back and compared notes about what we had just seen. When we had seen it on our caribou straddling it, the back was lean and V-shaped, appearing to be very muscular. When the arms began thrashing at the fallen caribou, they were extremely long, and the movements were performed at a speed which seemed like a blur to our eyes. After having risen to its feet and hoisting the body around its neck and shoulders, like you or I would lift a 5-pound bag of potatoes as if it was nothing, I think the craziest damn moment of it all was when we saw it lift up from being on all fours to 2, which was the defining moment of this. The singular movement completely blew us out of the water. We both knew at that point we were seeing something totally unique and, frankly, extraordinary, if not supernatural. And yet, there it was, hunting and walking, attacking a flesh and blood animal for food. It was just incredible. Today's second encounter. Back in mid-October of 1986, I had gone and visited my cousin, who at the time lived outside of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, a city being named supposedly by a man who found a pair of elkhorns in a tree. At any rate, I had a little time off of work and went to visit him for a couple of days. I believe it was a Friday night when the two of us were indulging in a couple of beers that the conversation took a turn, with my cousin starting to talk about the so-called Beast of Bray Road, If I'm correct, and it really doesn't matter as far as what happened goes, the area in which he lived and where this supposed creature dwelled named Walworth County. He went on and on about a variety of different people who claimed to have seen basically the same thing, which was a tall wolf-like creature that walked on its hind legs. Some of the claims were of seeing it in a cornfield, where others have seen it near farms or crossing roads in the area over a number of years. It was then that I had breached the subject of Bigfoot, saying maybe what people were seeing, in fact, was a Bigfoot. But my cousin stood his ground, stating that this was most certainly not a Bigfoot, but rather a tall, lanky, wolf-type creature with a long canine snout and pointed, upright ears. Well, the night ended, and 2 days later the visit ended as well, and I was back home in Illinois. It was 2 years later, in the fall of 1988, when I once again had gone to Wisconsin for a visit on my fall vacation. My cousin had arranged us to do a little bird shooting in a cornfield that was owned by an acquaintance of his in the area. I should mention to you that an enormous portion of this area of the state is predominantly used for dairy farming and corn production. There are fields and farmhouses which are bordered by strips of trees like fence lines everywhere you look. We had made our way over to this farm about 1 in the afternoon, and we were working our way through yet another field of standing corn stalks, if that's the proper terminology, when my cousin said, "Did you see that?" Now, we were walking side by side through this standing corn that was quite a bit higher than our heads, with one row in between us, separating the two of us as we walked. I said to my cousin, "Did I see what?" He said that something that had just run by his left side through the corn that looked like a large dog. At this point, we're in the middle of a large field of standing corn, far from either side of the field, and my cousin was saying that there was a huge dog running around in here that we couldn't see. My immediate thought was that I hoped it wasn't vicious, because it could have easily come after us from almost any angle to bite us, and there would be little, if anything, we could do about it. We certainly wouldn't start firing shots blindly, especially with the two of us paralleling each other through this field. We stood and listened, as both of us had heard some rustling in the corn coming from different directions, but nothing else was visible. I have to say that at the time it did seem like something was circling us, moving at a very rapid pace. Either that, or it was a couple or more of these critters making all the noise. We decided to make our way out of the field, and as we did so, my cousin was going to keep his eyes looking forward to the left. I was going to keep one eye behind us while looking off to the right, just in case there was a pack of dogs circling us, or even a coyote, against which we would hopefully defend ourselves if need be. A couple of minutes later, into this moving out of the corn, as the two of us were moving side by side, my cousin said, "Son of a, there it is!" As I turned quickly to look, my view of the direction in which he was looking was broken up by the standing corn between us. While he was looking straight down a row between the stalks, he shouted, "You mother..." He pulled the trigger, after which I heard a loud kind of deep yelp, which was followed by something running through the corn away from us. He then said, "Start running, don't stop," as we both now tearing it up through the corn, heading back the direction we had come. When we broke clear of the field, we stopped to catch our breath. I asked my cousin what he fired at, having seen nothing myself. He told me that when this thing had first stepped into the corn row in front of him, it was on all fours and appeared to be some type of large canine, like a timber wolf. He said as his mind was trying to process it, it didn't make any sense, with nothing of the sort being known in this area. It was then that his mind shifted gears to thinking about the beast of Bray Road. And before he could really make sense of it all, the creature stood on its hind leg and took a step towards him. That's when he decided to pull the trigger. He described it as being some 7 feet tall with long, thin, muscular legs and arms. When it was on all fours, its rump stood much higher than its forebody, looking like it was more of a crouched position, as if it was ready to launch itself forward. As it stood erect, its legs had somewhat unfolded, revealing how tall it actually was. He said its face reminded him of the character Wile E. Coyote from the Roadrunner cartoon, having a long snout with visible teeth, top and bottom, and its claws appeared to be more along the lines of hawk's talons than what one would see on a paw of a wolf or a dog. My cousin was now fully convinced he had become the latest to sight the infamous monster, and who was I to argue with him? I only wish that I saw it as well. Today's third encounter. This encounter happened back in the early 80s. I was 13 years old. It was a sunny fall afternoon in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Haven Woods, which is on a military base. Back then you could get into the woods. There was a BMX track back there. My best friend and I went looking for our friends. My bike had a flat, so we walked out there. As we got closer to the track, we could hear our friends, but when we got there, everyone was gone. So we started to walk back the way we came. As we walked, you could hear something walking with us in the woods. We yelled out, "Who's there?" No answer, so we continued walking. Now it was in front of us, walking on the trail, but we couldn't see anything. We yell again, "Who's there?" Still no answer. We keep walking. Now on the other side of us, you can hear and sense something walking with us, but it was invisible to the eye. Now we're both afraid. We turn back around and start walking toward the track. In front of us, in this direction, the same thing. Now we're both frightened. I knew the railroad tracks were to our left, so I grabbed my buddy and say, "Let's go to the tracks and get the hell out of here." I turn, and 10 feet in front of me, standing on its hind legs next to a tree, is a creature I had never seen before. 8 to 10 feet tall, very dark, well-built wolf. It was staring at us with its mouth agape, like we were its prey. We froze. I thought I screamed, but nothing came out. It felt like 5 minutes, but it was only seconds. We were frozen. This thing looked through my soul. I couldn't move. I regained a bit of composure, and we ran like the wind to a business outside of the woods, hammering on the glass door, which was locked. It was a Sunday afternoon. They were closed. We ran again towards home through the creek. I told my mom, but she had thought I'd seen some dog or someone was trying to scare us. The thing is, in every direction we turned, it was walking with us, unseen until it wanted to be seen. It was a sunny afternoon. I have believed in the supernatural ever since. I have been in those woods plenty of times after that and never seen a thing again. Granted, it took me years to go back there. Back in the day, there was a prisoner of war camp in the 40s, a missile silo in the 50s and 60s. I know there are lots of tunnels out there, but the government filled in and flooded them. So I guess there would be plenty of places for this thing to live underground. This thing was invisible, tracking us until it wanted to be seen. I feel lucky I lived through that. To me, the closest thing to what it looked like was the werewolf in American Werewolf in London film. Thank you, everyone. Tonight's fourth encounter. My family has always been notorious for doing things at odd hours, and, as you may well know, the strangest things always happen late at night. It was an unusually warm autumn some years ago, and at 16 years of age, I had just finished my summer job as an arts and crafts camp counselor. The only thing left to do was pick up a rather large trunk filled with my belongings. Unable to fit such a large trunk inside a Volkswagen Beetle I had purchased just a few weeks before, my mom was volunteered to transport it from the mountains back to the city in the larger of the family cars. Summer camp was a very wild place for me, with staff partying every night until the wee hours of the morning. My room was near the entrance of the staff residence, where all these parties took place. By late July, sleep-deprived party wimps like myself were weeded out. so I built a single mattress-sized platform in the woods and then covered it with some polyplastic. It was a 15-minute walk through the dense forest to get from the residence to the road, Bow Valley, Provincial Park, and undisturbed, protected. The forest was only a stone's throw away. It was there that my mother, a small dog named Willow, and myself were going to retrieve my trunk at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. Why 3 in the morning? I could say it was the heat, but it was mostly because my dad had not yet told that the car would be leaving town. There was also my adolescent's fear that knowledge of the platform construction would somehow reflect itself in my summer paycheck I had not yet received. My mom had to be at work by 6:30, so we had less than an hour to complete this covert action. As we approached the highway turnoff, a sliver of moon cast a glow border around the southwestern Alberta Mount Yamnuska. Driving several miles along the gravel road, the camp looked deserted. Summer staff had cleared out several weeks before, and a handful of permanent staff were either taking days off in the city or asleep in their cabin. Several miles from the summer campsite, angling off the side of the road, my mom left the headlights on, pointing into the trees. There was some discussion about taking the 20-pound dog named Willow for protection. However, Willow's track record for wandering off severely threatened a successful completion of the mission. Plus, very uncharacteristically, the dog named Willow refused to get out of the car and was now partially hidden under the driver's seat. Car headlights were of no value after the first few seconds of meandering through the forest. We had a flashlight, but I was having difficulty remembering the exact location. The 15-minute walk turned into a 30-minute skin-scraping bushwhacking, but finally we arrived at the isolated platform, even though the flashlight batteries were now dead. I assured my mom all that needed to be done was take down my polyplastic rain cover and carry back the mattress and trunk. It should only take 2 trips. She was noticeably silent as we began working in the darkness. My mom began untying strings, securing the poly to the ground, and I was kneeling on top of a 4-foot-high platform, stretching out to reach some tangled binder twine knots tied to the tree. A pungent stink suddenly flooded the air. My eyes moved from the knots to the tall length of plastic. There, distorted through the semi-transparent poly, was a huge shadow only 7 feet away. With the 4-foot platform and me kneeling atop, the creature was easily at eye level. A split second later, there was an incredibly loud screaming roar. Although I knew nothing how to describe it, the sound was like a peacock scream, a bear growl, and a lion roar, all combined somehow. I can't tell you if I screamed. I can't tell you how much of anything other than my eyes continued to peer through the plastic at this massive shadow. My 5 foot 3 inch tall mom somehow leapt in the air and was now on the platform beside me. Whatever it was finally turned and walked slowly away on its long hind legs. We continued watching as each heavy step could be heard connecting the ground. There were no visible ears, just a sparse mohawk-like fringe sprouting up from the tapering top of the creature's head. From behind, the upper body appeared massive. It continued to walk upright until disappearing into the trees. We stayed on top of that platform, motionless for some time. Then finally, I started ripping down the plastic. I have no idea what my mom did during the next 40 to 50 seconds. But my next memory was power walking through the forest, balancing a single mattress on my top of my head with one hand and carrying the handle of the trunk in the other. I assumed my mom was holding the other end of the trunk. With Willow still hidden under the driver's seat, it was a very quiet drive home. Late at night, they say that when your mind can play tricks on you, but I am so certain brown bears had been in the area that summer, but I had never seen a bear walk upright that smoothly for that long of a time. Or could it have been a very large, long-furred man standing over 7 feet tall in height? I say man because intuition tells me that this creature was a male. Could it have been a Sasquatch that night? Or something else? I will never really know for sure. But what you can bet is I will continue to tell this experience for as long as I can. Today's final encounter. It was May of '91 that my friend and I had ventured into a park for a little day hike. We were carrying a short cooler with some beers and sandwiches and had planned just to take it easy for the day. This area is just southwest of Mandeville, which is fairly close to where I still live, but my friend has passed since. Anyway, on that day, late in May, we were making our way down to the shore area of the Gulf where, when you reach it, the Gulf is on one side and there is marshlands on the other, with a strip of land that you can walk on between the two. There is a tremendous amount of wildlife there, including a number of critters which can take you out if you are not careful. My friend and I were not ignorant to the dangers of this area, having spent most of our lives hunting and shrimping. And I would say without hesitation that my buddy was a born hunter. When it came to tracking and navigating the swamps, he was the best of the best, I guarantee. So, we had made our way down into the area by the Gulf when my buddy pointed out some unusual tracks in the mud. I use the word unusual because I had seen virtually every track there is to see, including those made by a variety of snakes when slithering along, and I had never seen anything like it before. As we stood there looking down at these tracks, they were of a long foot of some type, being very narrow in the middle with 3 extended toes on the front and something like a talon on the rear portion of each foot. They looked very much like the foot of a large bird of prey, such as an eagle, with the exception being that these were about 16 inches long. We were no man's fool, and there are no birds around these parts or anywhere else with feet like that. This much we both knew, but there they were, and there was no doubt about it. Once we had laid our eyes on it first, we quickly picked up, and literally hundreds of them, which were all over this area, leading eventually into the marsh. Mark says, "Mason, these are tracks of the rougarou, and we need to be careful in here if we want to live to eat our dinner." I don't believe that there is a single Cajun who hasn't heard tales of the rougarou, and these tracks were making believers out of us for sure. The tracks were fresh and deep. In 6 hours, they would be washed out and undefinable for just the moisture in the soil. If it was the rougarou, it was here not too long before we arrived, and was most likely still in the area. We laid the cooler down and began to sneak around in the grass, trying to catch a glimpse of any activity of the beast. Now there are all kinds of nasty snakes in here, so we were being very careful when suddenly we heard what sounded like a man running through the marsh. And then it went quiet. The two of us looked at each other, backed out of where we were at, and went a little further along on dry land to re-enter the marsh grass in the direction where we heard the man running. As we were entering, parting the grass with our arms, as we walked, Mark lost his footing and fell in a heap, making a large splash and cussing up a storm. Seconds later, we heard a low growl, like a mad dog coming from the marsh. As we looked through the grass, there, standing in the marsh, was what looked like a dog with a human-shaped body. It was standing mid-calf in the water, having long, thin, muscular legs and arms to match. Its head looked like a wolf. There wasn't much hair on the body, but the head had quite a bit. It had a long snout with a black nose and pointed teeth. It looked like it was panting like a German shepherd. I have to say that it was at least 7 feet tall, taking into account that it was standing in the water, and its arms hung by its side like a human. But the hands were very different, kind of matching what the tracks looked like. The fingers were long and spindly, with what seemed like talons on the tips, just like those of a hawk, only straighter and round. This thing was not moving, it was just staring us down like it was going to attack at any moment. Mark looked at me and said, "Mason, let's just ease out of here." We started backing out with one eye in one direction and the other eye in the other, while listening for any movement in the water. And there was none. We turned out the heat on our walking and left the place lickety-split. I've never walked so fast in my life. In fact, we had bypassed where the cooler was and just left it. I have no idea what that thing was or where it came from, but it was there, and we saw it, I guarantee. I don't expect many to believe me and trust me. I've told more than a few. This is a kind of thing you hear at a pub after the regulars have consumed a few. But this was no ghostly apparition. It left physical tracks and moved water with its legs. This was the flesh and blood monster. I believe it was the Rougarou.
And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed today's bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone's simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.